The crowd was buzzing in the small downtown dojo, the kind of place where local martial artists came to show off their skills and earn bragging rights. The air smelled faintly of sweat and antiseptic, and the clatter of practice pads echoed off the walls. Everyone knew the man entering now would change the entire room's energy. Steven Seagal walked in. Jeans, black t-shirt, calm eyes, and the kind of silence that demanded attention without a single word. No entourage, no flash, no theatrics. Just a man who carried centuries of experience in his movements. At the far end of the dojo, a local fighter strutted across the floor, tossing his fists in the air, flexing muscles and smirking at anyone who dared glance his way. He was the self-proclaimed king of the dojo, a man who believed arrogance alone could make him invincible. The crowd laughed at his antics, clapping and cheering, feeding his ego like gasoline on fire. Then came Seagal's quiet approach. The chatter seemed to fade around him. Eyes followed him as he walked past the judges' table and stood at the center of the floor, unmoved by the loud, taunting laughter of the self-important fighter. The man's face twisted in confusion and contempt. "You're in my dojo now," the fighter sneered. "You think you can just stroll in and compete?" He laughed, loud enough for the entire crowd to hear, tossing his hands toward the ceiling. "I've seen your type. A few fancy moves and people will clap, but you won't last a single second against me." Seagal didn't reply. He simply shifted his weight, relaxed, and let his calm presence speak. The air seemed to tighten around him, and even the most confident spectators began to lean forward, curiosity flickering across their faces. The fighter stepped closer, circling like a predator, his grin widening. "I hope you're ready to get humiliated in front of everyone," he shouted, "because this will be a show no one will forget. And the joke's on you." Seagal's eyes met his, calm and unwavering like a still pond reflecting an approaching storm. Then with a slight nod he assumed a ready stance, not aggressive, not loud, but everything about him screamed, "Don't underestimate me." And then the first punch came. A gasp ripped through the crowd. Some instinctively leaned back. Others froze mid-cheer. The dojo fell silent, every single eye locked on the two men, unsure of what had just happened. That single, lightning-fast strike was enough to make everyone realize that arrogance had just met skill. And skill was winning. The fighter blinked, shocked, his smug smile gone in an instant. The silence stretched long enough for the room to understand. This was not going to be an ordinary day at the dojo. The dojo had been packed for hours, filled with local fighters, spectators, and a few wandering journalists who had caught wind of today's big match. The wooden floorboards creaked under the weight of anticipation. Everyone was here for a show, but no one suspected the quiet storm that had just walked in. Steven Seagal stood in the center, his posture calm, yet commanding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone silenced the chatter of the crowd. Some of the younger fighters exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether they were witnessing a man or a living legend. At the far side, the self-proclaimed dojo king was pacing like a lion in a cage. His gold necklace glinted under the overhead lights and his wristbands squeaked as he flexed his fists. He had been the undefeated champion here for months, and he believed that his reputation was untouchable. "You think you can come in here and just, teach me a lesson?" the fighter barked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do you know how many people I've knocked out? Do you have any idea who you're stepping in front of?" Seagal didn't flinch. He simply shifted his weight, rolling his shoulders slightly, and let his calm aura do the talking. It was the kind of composure that unnerved even the most confident individuals. The crowd noticed it immediately. Murmurs spread, "Who is this guy? Is that Seagal? He doesn't even look nervous." The arrogant fighter laughed, a loud mocking sound that bounced off the walls. "Ha, look at you. I expected someone big and scary, but all I see is just some guy. Jeans, t-shirt, calm face. That's it?" He stomped his foot, spinning in a circle to show off to the crowd. "I've got skills, speed, power. You're going to learn real fast that calm doesn't mean strong." Seagal finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. "Strength is more than muscles. Confidence isn't loud. Watch carefully." The fighter scoffed and raised his fists, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Confidence? I'll show you confidence. Let's see how confident you are after a real punch hits you." The dojo grew tense. Every spectator leaned forward, gripping benches and railing, some already recording on their phones. The local kids watching with wide eyes whispered to one another, their excitement and fear mixing into a palpable energy that electrified the room. Seagal didn't respond verbally. Instead, he assumed a ready stance, low, relaxed, balanced. Every subtle movement communicated control. The crowd could feel the difference immediately. This wasn't just a man showing off. This was a master, calm and precise, preparing for what would come. The fighter circled Seagal, throwing feints and quick jabs into the air, each one more exaggerated than the last. He taunted, "Come on, old man. Show me what you've got. You can't scare me with just a pose." Then came the whispers from the crowd. That first punch, it's going to change everything. Some spectators exchanged nervous glances, sensing that the arrogance of the challenger had already met its first warning. Seagal's calm eyes followed every move, reading the fighter's patterns, predicting each motion without a single twitch of impatience. The air was thick with tension, as if the dojo itself was holding its breath. You could hear a pin drop, and the sound of anticipation was deafening. The arrogant fighter stepped closer, his smirk now tinged with slight unease. "You're going to regret underestimating me," he said, his voice shaking just a little, betraying the first crack in his confidence. Seagal tilted his head slightly and smiled faintly. "Sometimes the first lesson isn't in the words you hear. It's in the moment you feel." Then the room waited, every eye locked on the two men, every heartbeat syncing with the impending action. One punch, one move. That was all it would take to make the crowd realize who truly commanded respect in this space. The atmosphere was electric. The tension was unbearable. The crowd knew something extraordinary was about to happen, but none of them could have predicted just how shocking the first strike would be. The dojo seemed to shrink as the tension between Steven Seagal and the arrogant fighter reached its peak. Every spectator held their breath, eyes wide, waiting for the inevitable clash. The challenger's smug grin had begun to falter. Confidence, once his greatest weapon, was starting to waver in the face of Seagal's calm, unreadable stare. "Ready to learn your first lesson?" Seagal's voice cut through the hum of anticipation. It was soft but carried an undeniable authority. The fighter laughed nervously, swinging his arms to show dominance, but even his bravado had a hint of uncertainty now. He lunged forward, fists raised, hoping to land a fast jab to intimidate the newcomer. The crowd flinched in unison. A few muttered under their breath, "Here it comes." The first strike. Seagal shifted his weight subtly, a movement almost too small to notice, but it was precise, calculated, and instantaneous. In one fluid motion he blocked the incoming jab, his hand barely moving as if it weighed nothing. Then, with a speed that seemed impossible for a man of his calm demeanor, his first punch found its mark. The impact wasn't loud, but it was enough. The arrogant fighter staggered back a step, blinking in disbelief. His grin had disappeared entirely, replaced by the stark realization that he had just underestimated his opponent. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Phones were raised, capturing every second. Some spectators leaned back in shock. Others instinctively stood, their mouths open, unable to believe the precision and power they had just witnessed. The fighter tried to recover, shaking his head and muttering, "No, that's not possible." His fists trembled slightly, betraying his shaken confidence. The dojo, once filled with laughter and chatter, was now drowned in stunned silence. Even the older trainers, who had seen countless fights, whispered to each other, Who is this man?" Seagal didn't move aggressively again. He didn't shout, nor did he boast. He simply stayed calm, balanced, and prepared. His eyes remained on the challenger, analyzing every micro-movement. Each second stretched like an eternity, as the arrogant fighter realized that the first punch wasn't a fluke. It was a warning, a statement of skill and experience that he couldn't match with arrogance alone. You're fast," the fighter stammered, his confidence shattered. "That first punch, how—" His words faltered. The crowd watched intently, leaning forward, sensing that the real lesson had only just begun. Seagal spoke again, quietly but firmly. "Sometimes pride blinds the eyes, and when that happens, skill is the only teacher." His tone carried no threat, only the undeniable weight of truth. The fighter raised his fists again, this time more cautiously, sweat forming on his brow. The earlier swagger was gone, replaced with a tense awareness of his own vulnerability. Each movement was measured, hesitant. The crowd could feel it, and the battle had shifted. It was no longer about showing off. It was about understanding respect and humility in the face of true mastery. The silence in the room was broken only by the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional gasp as Seagal's calm presence dominated the space. Every spectator, from the front row to the back, realized something profound. Arrogance, no matter how loud, could never overpower skill, patience, and composure. And in that dojo at that very moment, the first punch wasn't just a strike. It was a lesson, a revelation, and a moment that would be etched into everyone's memory forever. The challenger's face, pale and trembling slightly, told the story without words. He had underestimated the quiet one in jeans and a t-shirt, and he would never make that mistake again. The dojo was silent, but the silence was alive. Every pair of eyes locked on Steven Seagal and the trembling fighter, hearts racing, breaths held. The impact of that first punch lingered in the air like an electric charge. The crowd, who had come expecting entertainment, now realized they were witnessing something far beyond a simple showdown. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you see that?" Someone muttered, hand over their mouth. That first punch, it wasn't just fast. It was precise, controlled. Unbelievable. People shifted on their benches, leaning closer, craning their necks to see better, phones raised high to capture the stunned expressions of the participants. A few of the younger martial artists, the ones who idolized speed and brute force, exchanged wide-eyed glances. They had thought skill was measured in strength and showy moves. But now the subtle power of precision and calm had rewritten their understanding entirely. The fighter who had challenged Seagal was frozen in the center, fists trembling slightly at his sides. His chest heaved as he tried to regain composure. The earlier cocky grin that had filled the dojo with laughter was gone. He looked around, seeing the shocked faces of the crowd, the whispered awe in the air, and began to realize that this quiet man in jeans and a t-shirt was not just skilled. He was in a league all his own. Did he just do that?" Someone whispered near the back, barely audible. "That was instantaneous. How?" Even the dojo's most experienced trainers leaned in, eyes narrowing, nodding subtly at each other in recognition. They had seen many fights, many champions, but few had moved with the kind of silent authority Seagal possessed. Every subtle motion, every slight adjustment in stance spoke volumes. It was as if the room itself recognized mastery. The challenger raised his hands again, attempting to regain his stance, but his movements were hesitant now. He glanced at Seagal, searching for the man's weaknesses, but found none. Instead, he saw a calm, almost serene presence that seemed to command not just the space, but the attention and respect of every single person in the dojo. The crowd murmured, their voices low, forming a wave of astonishment. Some shook their heads, trying to process what they had just seen. Others whispered to friends, repeating the same words over and over. Unbelievable. Precise, unstoppable. Seagal remained composed, eyes scanning, reading, calculating. He didn't need to move aggressively. Each micro-expression on his opponent's face, every subtle shift in balance was enough for him to anticipate the next move. The crowd sensed it. The first punch was not a warning. It was a lesson. The kind of lesson that left a lasting impression far beyond the dojo floor. The fighter's confidence crumbled further with each passing second. He stammered, muttering under his breath, trying to mask the fear creeping in. The room felt heavy with tension, each spectator holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Some shifted nervously, their palms sweaty, realizing that this was no ordinary fight. Seagal's calm smile, almost imperceptible, conveyed more authority than any shout or flourish ever could. It was the quiet assertion of skill, discipline, and control, and the dojo understood it instantly. Respect wasn't demanded with loudness or arrogance. It was earned silently, with mastery. The crowd's whispers grew into audible awe, some standing, some frozen mid-step, all witnessing a lesson in humility and skill unfold before their very eyes. The dojo had transformed, from a place of casual entertainment into a stage where respect, power, and mastery had just claimed their victory. Every gaze followed Seagal. Every heartbeat synced with his presence, and everyone knew this moment would be remembered forever. The fighter, humbled, pale, and shaken, could feel it too. He had just learned the most important lesson of all. Arrogance can never outmatch calm skill. The dojo was still. The tension from the first punch and the stunned reactions had settled into a heavy, expectant silence. Every eye was fixed on Steven Seagal, every breath held as though the room itself awaited the next moment of revelation. The fighter, pale and trembling, tried to gather himself, his ego shattered and his confidence evaporated. Seagal didn't move hastily. He didn't raise his voice or shout a victory. Instead, he took a subtle step forward, his calm presence filling every corner of the room. The crowd leaned in instinctively as if drawn by some invisible magnet. Even the judges, hardened veterans of countless matches, exchanged knowing glances. They had witnessed the first punch, but now they realized that it was just a glimpse of the true mastery standing before them. "You've been watching," Seagal said softly, his voice carrying weight without force. "You've seen skill and speed, but you haven't yet understood control. Arrogance may make noise, but precision and patience teach lessons." The fighter, his chest still heaving, tried to respond. I thought, His words stumbled, swallowed by the overwhelming presence of the man he had challenged. Every gesture, every subtle stance adjustment from Seagal communicated authority, strategy, and experience far beyond anything the fighter had imagined. Seagal raised a hand slowly, not in threat but in demonstration. The subtle motion caused the fighter to freeze completely, unable to move, unable to react. And then, in one seamless flow, Seagal executed a series of moves, quick, precise, and perfectly measured, demonstrating not just strength, but an unparalleled understanding of martial arts. Every movement was deliberate, each one perfectly calculated to teach, not to harm. Gasps swept through the crowd. Some pressed record on their phones, shaking with excitement, while others simply stared, eyes wide in disbelief. "I've never seen anyone move like that," muttered a trainer from the sidelines, shaking his head. "It's unreal." The fighter stumbled back, his face pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. His earlier confidence had been replaced entirely by awe and fear. I didn't know. I had no idea," he stammered, finally realizing the depth of the mistake he had made in underestimating this quiet man. Seagal's eyes scanned the room, landing briefly on each onlooker. Strength is not loud. Power is not shown through arrogance. True skill is silent, precise, and commanding without the need for proof. His words weren't just spoken. They were absorbed by the atmosphere, etched into the minds of everyone present. And then, the twist that no one had anticipated. A subtle nod from Seagal caused the dojo's advanced trainers to recognize him. Whispers turned into audible astonishment. "That's Steven Seagal, the legend. He's here? The man himself?" The realization rippled through the crowd. The fighter, now utterly humbled, sank slightly, understanding that he hadn't just challenged a skilled man. He had stepped into the dojo of a master whose reputation alone could silence the boldest of challengers. Seagal didn't gloat. He didn't boast. He simply exhaled, relaxed, and allowed the lesson to settle into every mind in the room. The dojo, once filled with arrogance, noise, and bravado, had transformed into a chamber of respect, humility, and awe. "You've seen the first strike," Seagal said softly, almost to himself. "But remember this. Skill paired with calm will always surpass ego paired with noise. The lesson is yours if you're willing to learn." The fighter could only nod, trembling, finally understanding the depth of the mistake he had made. And the crowd, still gasping and whispering, realized they had witnessed more than a fight. They had witnessed a revelation, a master silently teaching humility, precision, and respect with nothing more than a calm presence and a first, unforgettable strike. The dojo would never forget this day. Every movement, every gasp, every whispered word had become part of a lesson far greater than any fight. The lesson of true mastery. The dojo was a different place now. The echoes of the first punch and Seagal's precise movement still lingered in the air, leaving an invisible mark on every spectator. What had been a room full of arrogance, bravado, and laughter was now silent, almost reverent. Every person present seemed to recognize that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a lesson far beyond what any ordinary fight could teach. The fighter who had challenged Seagal stood frozen in the center of the floor, fists loosely hanging at his sides. His earlier confidence had completely vanished, replaced by a mix of awe, fear, and newfound respect. He glanced at Seagal, trying to understand how a man so calm, so unassuming, could possess such mastery. His voice trembled as he spoke, barely audible over the hushed murmurs of the crowd. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't I didn't realize. I misjudged you, he stammered, bowing slightly. His shoulders shook, not with anger, but with humility. The dojo had forced him to confront a truth he had long ignored. Arrogance is fragile, and skill commands respect quietly without noise or display. Seagal's expression softened, yet his calm authority never wavered. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the apology, but made no overt gesture of reward or forgiveness. That was the nature of his lesson. Lessons weren't given for show. They were absorbed through observation, reflection, and experience. The crowd, now fully engaged, whispered among themselves. The young martial artist in the front row leaned forward, taking mental notes of Seagal's every move, every subtle stance adjustment. Even the most seasoned trainers shook their heads, murmuring phrases like, incredible, unparalleled, a living legend in motion. Everyone knew they had witnessed something rare, a demonstration of true mastery, humility, and power. The humbled fighter finally straightened, eyes lowered, realizing the depth of the moment. I understand now, he said quietly. Skill, patience, respect, and it's not about showing off. It's about knowing when to act and how to control yourself. His voice carried a weight of realization that no words could have conveyed earlier. Seagal gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. He didn't need to say more. The room felt the silent authority in that gesture, the quiet reminder that mastery is as much about restraint as it is about strength. Without another word, Seagal stepped back, moving toward the dojo's exit. The crowd instinctively parted, some craning their necks to follow him, some still stunned into silence. The dojo felt larger now, echoing with the memory of his presence. Every footstep, every movement left a lasting impression of calm power and undeniable skill. As he reached the door, the fighter and the spectators remained frozen. The lesson had been delivered, not with loud proclamations, not with theatrical displays, but with quiet precision and undeniable truth. Respect had been earned, humility demonstrated, and arrogance humbled. Seagal paused at the doorway, glanced briefly over his shoulder, and offered a faint, serene smile. Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. The crowd exhaled as one, a collective release of tension, awe, and admiration. The dojo had returned to normal, or at least it appeared to. But everyone knew it would never be the same again. The energy, the lesson, and the memory of that day were etched into every mind present. The humbled fighter sank to one knee, not in defeat, but in reflection. He had been taught something far greater than winning or losing a match. He had been shown that true mastery comes with calmness, patience, and respect, values that no arrogance or bravado could ever replace. And in the quiet aftermath, the dojo remained alive with whispers, reflections, and awe. The lesson of the first punch, the demonstration of skill, and the silent authority of Steven Seagal would echo in the minds of everyone there for years to come. The dojo had finally settled into quiet after the storm of adrenaline, shock, and awe. The spectators, once eager for a spectacle, were now left with something far more profound, a living lesson in humility, skill, and respect. The echoes of Steven Seagal's presence, the calm authority he carried, and the precision of that unforgettable first punch lingered in the air like a silent mantra. The fighter who had challenged him stood off to the side, shoulders slumped, chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. His eyes, once filled with arrogance and bravado, now held something new, understanding. He had been humbled not by loud words, not by threats, not by displays of strength, but by quiet mastery. Seagal had taught a lesson that no shouting or pride could ever replace. Around the room, the crowd murmured to each other, repeating phrases like, "That first strike. It was everything. And I've never seen skill like that." Some whispered about the control, the poise, the calm energy that radiated from him. Others reflected on their own behavior, how often they had judged someone by appearances, underestimated the quiet, or let arrogance cloud their judgment. Seagal's departure left a vacuum in the room, not of absence, but of awareness. Everyone knew they had witnessed more than just a fight. They had witnessed a principle, a philosophy embodied in a single silent man, that true power isn't loud, true authority doesn't need to shout. True respect isn't demanded, it's earned, quietly, deliberately, and with integrity. The humbled fighter finally bowed deeply, not as a formality, but in acknowledgement of a truth he could no longer ignore. His fists, once raised in arrogance, now rested calmly at his sides. He had learned that arrogance blinds, that pride falters under real skill, and that the loudest voices are often the weakest. Seagal, far away now, left without a word. He had no need to claim victory or bask in recognition. The lesson was complete, delivered through movement, precision, and the quiet force of mastery. It was a moment designed to leave an imprint, not on paper or video alone, but on the hearts and minds of everyone who had been present. And the moral became unmistakable. Respect isn't about status, money, or reputation. It isn't about the muscles you flex or the noise you make. Respect is about presence, integrity, and awareness. It is about recognizing skill and character, even in someone who seems ordinary at first glance. Humility is the true strength. Calm is the real power, and mastery is measured not by what you can crush, but by what you can teach quietly, without ego, without display. The dojo, once a stage for arrogance and display, now carried a new energy, a reverence for discipline, skill, and humility. The spectators left with something far greater than excitement. They carried inspiration. They carried a lesson that would echo long after the doors closed, reminding them that in life, as in martial arts, quiet mastery will always outshine noise and pride. Type respect in your mind. If you understand that humility and calm strength are the true marks of mastery, reflect on moments when arrogance tried to impress you, and remember that real skill often arrives silently, changes lives without fanfare, and leaves lessons that last forever. Every gaze, every gasp, every whisper from the dojo that day told the same story. Arrogance meets skill, and only one leaves transformed. And in that transformation we find the truest definition of power, silent, deliberate, and earned.